someone joked and said that game of football doesn't love you as much as you love it. As a judge, you are always being judged, I might say, because you are always the eyes of the public with regard to be your decision, be your orders, or anything that you are doing in the courtroom. Meeting adversities with a lot of grit, lot of perseverance, and at the same time being smart enough to know what calls for your attention and what does not. As a judge, you are always expected to be independent and not having pre-biased views. The mental toll is something that comes with any person studying for his exams. I think it's the same. Just that I don't get questions asked in this exam, but I have to write the answer anyway because the question is in the form of the matter that is in front of me. I'm a person who loves to have a lot of fun.
Good day, esteemed listeners. Welcome to yet another captivating installment of Believe in Future Amazing Mentor series that brings you the stories of exceptional individuals who embody the spirits of mentorship and inspire us to pursue our dream relentlessly. I am your host Gaurav Garg and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey of discovery. Today I am delighted to introduce you to a truly remarkable individual, someone whose accomplishments in both the legal sphere and the world of sports law have left an indelible mark on those around him. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Chirayato Banerjee, a sergeant judge and a dual qualified solicitor with fervent passion for intricacies of sports law, particularly in the realm of football. Mr. Banerjee's journey is one that optimizes dedication, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to excellence. From his early days as a legal intern to his current role as judge, he has navigated the complexities of legal system with unwavering determination, all while nurturing a deep-seated love for the beautiful game of football. Throughout his career, Mr. Banerjee has not only educated a wide array of legal disputes, but have also actively contributed to the advancement of sports law through his scholarly pursuit of collaborations with industry experts. His passion for learning and his insatiable curiosity have driven him to explore new horizons, completing courses of intellectual property rights, sport sponsorship, doping regulations, and more from prestigious institutions around the globe. As we embark on an enlightening conversation with Mr. Banerjee, I am confident that his insights will leave an indelible impression on all of us, serving as the beacon of inspiration for those who dare to dream big and believe in the transformative power of mentorship. It's a pleasure to welcome Chirayato Banerjee to our show, Amazing Mentor. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, and thank you so much for the kind words. I really feels great actually to be here and speaking to you. I'm hopeful that the program that you are carrying out is doing fantastic work, inspiring people, and I hope to be of service on that point. So let's see. Thank you again for bringing me here.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for giving us the time to cover your journey. So can you share some of your memories from your childhood that shaped you to what you are today?
Well, actually, I studied law after my plus 12. Plus 2, I studied BBA LLB and I had my honors in corporate laws. To connect that with the childhood would only be with respect to one point, that I always believed in doing what is just in a particular situation. And at times during my childhood in games or otherwise in other local instances, the just thing to do would not be absolutely beneficial for my interest or for the team's interest. Like in football, when you are in the penalty box, it would be absolutely in the team's interest to make the most of the contact that you have and to get a penalty for your team, but that might be the just thing to do. That kind of is something that I figure has brought me here to what I'm doing. And also the fact that, well, this is something which my friends tell me. I'm not really sure of this because they say that they have always seen this person, that is me, to be as someone who says and follows it up by doing what he says. So that is something which I have belief in, and that belief has led me to be here presently, because it might sound a bit boastful, but then the fact being that to manage a full-time job and to qualify as a solicitor, of course, thanks to my parent court's permission for that, was a task indeed. And the only thing which helped me achieve that was this aspect of my childhood, that I do what I say that I promise to do. I always thought of being a dual qualified solicitor would give me a further fillip to my interest in sports law, because sports law in India as well as in the UK as well as in the other countries, especially in the US currently, they are on an absolute uptick. So the dual qualification kind of makes me, or makes whatever I say or my comments as something which holds some value probably, and also gives me a lot of understanding as to the issues which are plaguing in the country, in the worldwide, or in general. So these would be a few of my childhood aspects which I think they have helped me to reach where I have reached presently. Barring that, I think the higher studies, the IP laws, and all the things that you said, all those things, they have made me, or they are not made me, but I am in the process of being a person who probably can armor himself with all the knowledge that is required to progress to a better understanding of any subject matter that I am dealing with. Because as we all know, there is no end to learning and understanding and knowing. So I believe this quest for knowledge is something which holds a lot of value for me. And also that in turn indirectly kind of transitions into something which is materially for the world to see, because all the knowledge that I gain is something which is completely intrinsic to my own being and my own understanding of a particular subject. But if I'm being able to reflect that with the way I suppose write my judgments or pass an order or even write an article or share my views on anything, I think that is the outward reflection of my knowledge which is for the world to see, and probably determine if that is something which is of value or which is right or wrong, because that is then for the world to judge. Because that is, once I have shared my opinion or passed an order, I'm like the, as we say in law, I'm the functus officio. I don't have anything to do with it anymore. Then it's out there in the woods. So yeah, so I think these are the few childhood values, if you ask me, Gaurav, which they have really shaped my present being, and I hope that these will continue to shape my future career, which I believe I have some miles to go. So fingers crossed on that. Let's see.
What are your favorite childhood pastime and hobbies, and any mischief activity you remember from your childhood that you have done and enjoyed?
A lot, a lot. I think my mother would be the best person to answer that. But then a lot of mischief, lot of favorite activities would be playing football, playing cricket, playing all the other sports that usually any child in India would do or in Bengal would do. I grew up in the 90s, and football is something that was very integral to the Bengali household as well. As so all the mischiefs on the field and all the, as we say in Bengal, adda, that is pretty integral to the Bengali culture again. So all of these things, they were a lot. I'm glad actually that I did whatever I did, because I think once you know what is something that can be done in a mischievous way, you know when other person is trying to do that thing with you. And especially with my current role, it gets easier to pick on them, or rather to discern the wrong from the right. That of course does not suggest that I was into mischievous things and illegal things, because those are completely different. I'm talking of frivolous mischief, which any child would have done for sure. And so I believe one, as a child or as someone growing up, if you have the exposure of hanging out with friends and of friends from various, so I had friends from various backgrounds. Like I'm a normal low middle class or middle class person that I have, but then my friends would include from people from pretty families who would be like not so, a little bit impoverished scales, who would not be going to the same school as I did, as well as some people who would be going to extremely upscale neighborhoods and schools. So a football field, I believe, is a melting pot from people, for people from all the backgrounds and economies. So that is one of my biggest learnings and lessons, which I think, when I look back, kind of has shaped my values, my principles, to be kind to people and to look for the opportunity to help people. So I believe these are the formative years that you spend with people from various cultures, various backgrounds. They actually build a lot of character. They build a lot of resilience and integrity as an individual when you have grown up. And again, harping back on the present role that I am undergoing, I think it actually has shaped a lot of my work principles, work ethics, and to do the right thing at the right time, and to think of the organization at large over and above my personal interest, and to work as a team leader, because as a judge you have a team of people who I'm really indebted to, that they are helping me out, be it my court staff or office staff or my personal assistant and everyone. So this is actually something which has built up my ability to work with a team, and at times when required lead them, But I believe in equal leadership for all of them, because that kind of brings in a lot of accountability, I feel, for someone doing work. And in a team, there is no particular person whose work is less important, I feel. And I resonate this thought of mine with all my staff members so that they know that they are leading their own particular set of work that they're doing, because that brings in a lot of accountability, and at the same time that ensures that they find meaning in what they're doing, which might just be taking up a pen and paper and signing for stuff or just arranging things. But then the point being, if you do not find meaning in the work that you do, then the quality of the work suffers. So these are the kind of childhood mischief, if you would like to call them, or activities which I think they are pretty memorable, and I am actually thankful that they have helped me and being what I am, and to develop this work ethic principle in me. That is the best thing about these memories, to be honest.
So, were there any influential figure in your childhood that inspired you to pursue your career path?
Yes, not with regard to the career, particularly in law or otherwise in sports or anything. But then the figures that surrounded me during my childhood were always people who would believe in doing the right thing. So be it my parents or my brother or my friends in school, not always in the neighborhood, but then, as I said, there were a bunch of people who not be always doing the right things, because in the ground, there might be things which might boil off a bit. But then otherwise, the figures that I mentioned, be it my friends from school, be it some of them from my neighborhood as well, and my parents and my brother and other family members, I always saw all of them to be very hard work. And from my school itself, I followed a few YouTube videos and figurines and people who they are still doing pretty well in their fields, and they are doing well as influencers, or be it people trying to bring in change in how individuals think and perform. And so the first such book that I read in my standard 11th or 10th, I think, that was The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So that book was with regard to a lawyer. I'm pretty sure many people by now know that, and by now this book is pretty famous. The author is pretty famous as well. So this book was about a lawyer who suffers a heart attack, and he goes for the searching for the inner purpose of life. And I found a lot of meaning from that book to transcend into my own life. You can say that that was the first such kind of a book that I read. Probably that's why it holds a lot of meaning for me. But otherwise also, I think the value of hard work, the value of showing up, the value of being on time, the value of not saying no when something has to be done for the greater good of the organization or the society. These are the few principles which I believe they helped me a lot, and I learned them from all the influential figures that I had around me back then. I'm still fortunate enough to have them around me now presently. So I've always seen the value of rewarding work being rewarded, or hard work being rewarded by a satisfaction that something was done properly, or something was done in the way that it should have been done. So these things and the value of these things are priceless, as I would say, because they help me in developing a structure around the way I think, and also developing a plan, or a plan to fall back on, or a plan to quote unquote evacuate when there is a situation like that which warrants a lot of secondary thought processes and alternatives or creative way of thinking, not giving up hope. Because when I became a judge, I was already working before that. I worked at 2 other places, and then I sat for this exam. So that time I did not have any plan to fall back upon. So because if this judiciary thing would not have cracked, then I would have had to thought about something else, because I did not have a full-time job at that point of time. So that might be a lack of safety measure for someone, while at the same time for someone like me, that was the only thing that I had to do at that point of time. So in a way, it kind of helped me channel my focus much better. But now that I've secured the second rank and qualified, I can see all these things. But if I had failed, then probably the lessons would have been pretty different for me. And I don't know if we would have been talking here, but then if someone would have asked something, what have you learned, then the things would have been pretty different from what I'm saying right now, because circumstances and events shape our learnings, I believe. And of course, the way we choose to look at them. So I chose to look at my situation back then as something which was challenging, but at the same time rewarding as well, because I worked hard, and I got the reward that the hard work called for. I won't say deserved, but the hard work called for the reward that it got. So this is something I believe has shaped a lot of my belief in the present situation. I'm over 30 years old right now, but then probably looking back at events and incidents from 20 years ago or 15 years ago during my adolescent period, those instances, they have really helped me a lot in growing up and developing myself in a way that I look. I can say that in a way I think, which might not be the best way, but at the same time, it has helped me a lot to process difficulties and challenges in life. So these were the few figures I think, and events rather, which helped me grow a lot from my childhood to the present stage.
So any particular memory or experience you had during your school or college years, of course not normal in nature, mischief in nature?
Okay. So I remember I was in class 7. So my mother used to work in a bank, and that time, so generally we had this field behind our residence where we would play. It's in the same housing society where we stay. And so every time she would come back from office, she would check whether I'm there playing with the field, to any mischief, as you say, or any shenanigans which are not very innocent shenanigans maybe. So all of the worst possible beliefs a mother might have had, she also had, I guess, about me. So that particular evening that I'm referring to, I was nowhere to be found inside the colony, and I was not supposed to go out because I was still 12 years old. So I was not supposed to leave the estate because there were main roads and vehicles coming. As Indian parents or Bengali parents, I guess they are, because the main roads and vehicles would rush in at a huge speed. So I was not allowed to probably cross them without adult supervision or something, because I was a very mischievous child, so they kind of had the worst beliefs every time I would step out. But then, so that particular evening, I was nowhere to be found, and she contacted all the security guards, and she contacted, but they couldn't say anything about me where I was. They saw none of my friends. The field was empty, and it was pretty late. It was around 7 p.m. So luckily for her, and unluckily for me, one of my friends did not go with us wherever we were at that point of time. So he was there, and so when my mother asked him, he said, "Auntie, they have gone to play a match with the neighborhood slum beside a burial ground that there was there." So it was a slum area, and we had gone on to play a football match. And it was just behind a burial ground, or beside the rail line, like not very, what do you call that? Like not very safe measures, because we are having a rail line pass through and with the field right beside them, and also an area where I had never been before that. And it was also pretty late, like 7:30. So when I came back, obviously she was full of rage, and for obvious measures, because she, all hell kind of broke loose actually. I got beaten up pretty bad. I felt obviously horrible when all of that happened, because to me it was like something I had just gone on to play a football match. I was not doing drugs or anything. But the fact being that what that led as a reaction on my mother's well-being was something which I learned much later, because any adult person with a child at his or her supervision, and if the child is nowhere to be found, can cause a lot of nervous breakdown for someone. And so probably, and she just come back from work, she must have been filled with super stricken anxiety. So the behavior that followed after that was something which hurt me a lot, both physically as well as otherwise. But then I realized that's something which I shouldn't have done. Probably I should have informed her. This is something which I believe taught me a lesson which otherwise just a preaching lesson wouldn't have, that not to venture into unknown places without informing, or just being responsible enough to care for your parents' well-being and letting them know that you're all right and everything in your own possible way. You didn't have mobile phones or everything back then at that time, so in your own possible ways, letting them know, or just ensuring that they're fine. So all these things kind of, nobody teaches you, but they are something which you learn and inculcate as you grow up. But this was one of mischievous activity, as you referred to, which taught me a lot, and also which kind of, I still look back at it fondly. Presently I look back at it pretty fondly, but not back then, because this is something which I believe is they actually, incidents like these, they kind of make you see the real world pretty quickly, because you have gone into a territory which is unknown for you. You come out of it, you come back to familiar territories where you are expected to behave in a particular way. So that gap that is there when you're out there in the world and when you're back in your familiar territory, these events, they kind of teach you the difference between the two and how you're left to fend for your own. And I think, this was one such incident which taught me a lot about balancing, as I was saying, like balancing the interests of your own personal interests as well as the interests of people who are looking up to you, as well as your team with whom you're presenting the outside world. I think this is particular one such event which taught me a lot about this balancing act, as well as being careful and responsible enough in your life in general.
So, have there been any mentor or role model who have significantly influenced your professional and personal growth?
In professional, I would like to call the football lawyers that I know, all of them. They have been excellent mentors to me. First one being a UK-based lawyer whom I met in Bombay. That was in 2019. And personally and professionally as well, all of the books that I read, I follow this particular way of thinking, which is I try to follow. I can't say follow, which is the Stoicism and the Daily Stoic, the emails that I subscribe to. And I think these are the mentors whom I have never met, but through their writings, through their sayings, and through the words of the great ancient Greek philosophers that we see, like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and all the other epic teachers as well. So all these mentors, they have played a huge role in my professional as well as personal growth, because trying to face adversity with resilience is, I think, the biggest one. If I'm asked to point out, that's the one biggest lesson or value that an individual should hold key in his or her life. Because as life, we all know it's filled with adversities as well as good and bad events. So building resilience, which I'm not evangelizing being always in a fight mode, but the point being that if you know that you have the resilience to face a situation, then I think it helps you look at the positive side of things as well. So to my mentors in professional and personal growth, these were the few people, the books that I've been reading and I still read, and my network over LinkedIn and the people that I talk to. I can't name every one of them because it's a huge list, to be honest. But then I think they have all done a fantastic role that they have. And last year I was in London in November, and the people that I met over there, all the fantastic sports lawyers, were absolutely kind enough to host me and talk to me and know my journey and also allow me to learn from them, knowing how busy they are. So I think all of them, I really am hugely and deeply grateful and thankful to all of them, because the role that they have played might not be able to turn into material copy based book or something, but then the impression and the impact that those meetings and otherwise they have left is unquestionably huge. And without them, I wouldn't be here where I am presently, both with regard to my personal stage as well as my professional state of mind growth. So I'm really thankful to them for that.
So, what was the reaction of your parents post they came to know that okay, you have become a judge?
Oh, they were really happy because before that I was working in Bombay, India's probably one of the biggest law firms. I left that, then I took up work in a startup in Delhi, and after that I wasn't doing any. I did a few freelance working as a sports journalist, again with someone who was really kind enough to offer me that, and I was accredited media personnel for the Athletic Kolkata. Now that the team that I was following back then as a media personnel, so I wasn't doing any full-time job. So obviously, as any parent would be, I was 25 was when I sat for the exam. So any parent would be there pretty anxious as to what I'm doing. Because as I said, financially we were not absolutely something that we could take up another student loan and go for higher education at that point of time, because I needed a job at that time, to be honest, and I was not doing anything. I was not funding. So I was happy with the way that I was getting to do all these football articles and traveling. And but then financially, at that point of time, things were a bit troubling for my own self-worth, if I'm allowed to say that. So when they came to know, and that was my first attempt when I cleared the judiciary. So when they came to know of that, of course it might seem strange, but I would love to add this. My friend who's currently in the US, I called him first, told him when I saw the name, and then I called my mother. So she was very happy and I think proud as well. I see the pride now more, because now when I've joined the service and I'm there in the service, so I see the pride part of it more now. Back then they were also pretty uninitiated as to what this entails as a judge, how the things would pan out, and you don't listen to people being judges at their 20s, I guess. So things are pretty surprising for them as well. But then I'm very happy and very relieved, I think that would be the best way to put it, that finally this guy is doing something, and yeah, proud as well, I think.
Can you walk us through the early stages of your professional journey from your first job or internship to where you are today?
2009 was my first internship in Calcutta. It was at an NGO, and there we looked at a lot of the children and taking care of their education as well as their well-being, and at the same time deal with their other issues like be it delinquency, be it conflicts with the law, or be it their events like something which can be very dangerous like drug abuse. I saw all of that when I was interning. I'm really grateful again for the person who allowed me to do that. She is right now working with the United Nations. I think my friend and I were working with her, and things that I saw there right at the beginning, And again, I would like to thank my university and USA for this, because the structure that they had was the first year would be spent interning at the NGO, and then you might go onto courts and then firms if you want. So the first year internship at the NGO was really an eye opener for me, because I was fresh from the school, 18 years old. It was actually really, what do you call that? I mean, not exactly path breaking, but something which was really awe inspiring as to how people live below poverty line and the slums that we visited. That kind of late years of my teenage and early years of my young adult life, those experiences, I think they helped me come to terms with the real world pretty quickly, because at times we sort of overestimate, or rather underestimate our realities and overestimate our wants. And I think we have to do the gratitude exercise every day, because the way we are lucky than probably more than 75% of the world is something which we often forget. I think took birth at that point when I realized people how less privileged they were than where I was back then. We all have our own share of sadness and sorrows, but the privilege part and the gratitude part for that shouldn't be excused, I feel. So from there on, I went on to intern with various lawyers in the High Court, in the Supreme Court, the district courts, and in law firms, both corporate and litigation. As we are talking in Gurgaon, I was there, and there was a partner who had really taken me under his aegis, and I'm thankful for him. Although at that time it seemed like it was such a task, in a cold December evening, coming back late evening, all alone there as a 21, 22-year-old. I thought that was really challenging, but then when I realized that all those events were just a stepping stone for the actual challenges of life, I'm grateful that I had those experiences, being visiting families of real estate authorities and sellers of huge acres of land and real estate transactions, at the same time get into the details of project finance, something which again shaped my interest in this particular area, project finance, which was my first job, by the way, at Amarjun, Bombay. So for that, it was one of the internships in Delhi, Nehru Place, one of the firms, which that really helped me develop my interest in project finance, because I learned the basics. Obviously, as an intern, you're not expected to get into all the nuances of the transaction, but the basics and the fundamentals of the concept, of the various concepts involved in running a law firm at one particular subject matter, which I explained, project finance. Those things, they kind of really helped me develop my interest in this particular area of law, and eventually my first job, which led to it. So I think these internships developed to begin with my personal viewpoint, look at things, and secondly, and most definitely, my professional aspirations as well to begin, because with time, with experiences, your aspirations, they are bound to change. Your expectations from yourself, they're also bound to change in a positive way. I believe you tend to expect more and more from yourself. So these internships and finally the law firm job which I undertook in the first year after passing out, graduating, these have been really a stepping stone for me to see things that I might have done better, or the mistakes that I made and the learnings that I could absorb from those mistakes. Obviously with the hope that I do not repeat them in the future. And I would hold these internships probably a very high pedestal in helping me develop my professional acumen, at the same time reach where I am presently. And as I have repeated often by this time, develop my work ethics, which I believe is actually very important, helping someone do the right thing at the right point of time.
So, what motivated you to pursue a career in law and eventually specialize in sports law?
Sports is something that I said has always been in my psyche, as football or cricket. Football is something which I like more, obviously. That is kind of evidence my 2 surgeries on my knee, which I have already undergone with my undying love of the game. For that, someone joked and said that game of football doesn't love you as much as you love it. My uncle also made that joke once when he heard of all these events. So all these things, they were always there. So I always thought of being a sports journalist, I think, or doing something covering Champions League or the World Cup. And so all these dreams were there, aspirations were there. So I was lucky to do that in between transitional phase where I was not working, and at the same time I hadn't yet started preparing for judicial. So that always developed this interest in sports, in something which I would have to do in sports. So I knew that the end game is something which would be in the world of sports. Now when I graduated in law, again it is something which happened by chance, because as I said, I wanted to do journalism. But then back then, this exam admission, I saw my grandfather actually saw this, and NLA Odisha was a national law university, and they were conducting the entrance examinations. So I sat for them and I got through the first list itself, and I didn't look back, because you would understand National Law University in itself is a place where you expect excellence, but now things have changed a lot, and it's for the good, because for the democratization of education institutions, I think it has come down a lot to individual perspectives and individual beliefs and individual ability. So back then I to be honest, I did not trust my individual abilities a lot. So I went into the university with a lot of hope. But I'll be honest, I did not really like the subjects or the way that I was doing in the exams or otherwise, or the way I was looking at subjects. So I was purely from science background, and back there I had opted for BB LLB, which entailed a lot of commerce and studies of finance and accountancy. And I wasn't really doing great to cope up with them, with the subjects which were absolutely new. So I started questioning myself, if I'm being honest, that whether if this is the right thing. But when I started slowly getting into the subject of the law, I found out that things are not that bad. Things are, or things can be pretty interesting. And that has been slowly and eventually I stopped looking back at my decision with regret and started accepting and eventually enjoying the decision of studying law. And back when I graduated, I always had this belief that probably you have studied BBA and then you need to get into corporate law because that's the way how things work. The third category of people that I thought. But I'm really grateful that I had the courage and bravery to leave all that and probably get into something which entailed a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, and at the same time gave me a lot of understanding of the law as a subject and its impact in the lives of human beings from a day-to-day basis. On a daily basis, I think I can see how my decisions and my orders play out in the lives of people. And so coupled with this legal career which I had already developed, and the fact that sports was always there somewhere in my psyche, and I always knew that I have to come back to this because you have to come back to where you belong. So, and I know that I belong in the world of sports. Law is something which will only help me probably progress farther ahead in this field than I would have otherwise. So I took up the mantle of reading and learning a lot my own, and the dual qualification which followed as a process was something which was done with the belief that this will help me in understanding the laws of a country where sports and especially football is a huge thing. The Premier League is one of the crown jewels of English football presently, and the dual qualification was done only with the view to help me understand the laws of the country where football is such a huge thing and the way impact of the legal system has on the game of football. So recently it came up with an independent regulator and to govern the issues of football, and there are other nuances to it as well. But my continuous learning process where I keep taking up decisions passed by CAS or the FIFA chambers. I am lucky enough to have sports lawyers around me who would ask me to write and send on articles to me on the decisions that they have worked on and share their learnings with me. With all of these, they kind of help me to get back to where I always thought I belonged. And I do because I'm loving it, because I presently might be working professionally as a judge, but my side passion interest, the aspect of sports and its legal part of it. It's absolutely fascinating. When I come back home, I do not have a judgment to look forward to or to write. I am always trying to switch in with the sports world of things and write or read or just help me understand things and make notes. And I think that is helping me understand A, the legal parts of it, and B, the industrial part of it, the commercial part of it. Because any industry cannot survive without the finances backing it. It might sound a bit shallow, but then that is what it is. Any industry, be it law, be it sports, be it any industry, the profits and the commerce motive behind it to succeed. So that is a big thing when it comes to sports, because otherwise you can't really expect millions of people watching, and that is all that we are backing on in the world of sports to generate finances. But then the interest part of me in this world, that actually helps me a lot studying and understanding the recent trends and developments and knowing what the world of sports entails vis-a-vis the legal side of it. So I think this is how they perfectly have kind of married my profession as well as my passion, and presently I am in the path of following. Let's see how far this leads to.
So, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced while starting your professional journey, and how did you overcome them?
I started at a law firm, and I was still very raw with regard to understanding of the various aspects of commercial law firm, and that too one of the India's biggest law firm, how it works. And so there my mentors helped me, but I wasn't being able to find myself, and I kind of thought that I still needed some more understanding of the subject before I would like to be in this field. And that is when I joined the startup, which incidentally had conceptualized the first All India bar examination. And there it was a different atmosphere. It was a lot of large scale upskilling, learning happened to me in a very short span of time. So you can call these challenges, you can call these key springboards which helped me escalate further in my career path. But I at that time wasn't sure of what I was doing. I had to find myself somewhere, and that is why I think a large scale learning path was happening at the same time while I was still trying to figure out and struggle as to what exactly is the kind of work that I would want to do, or I am struggling to find the right kind of work balance for me, or I'm struggling to find the right kind of responsibilities that I would want to shoulder. So I think a lot of learning was happening at that time, and it was very quick. The learning curve, once you hit the practical world, it's very fast and at a very short span of time. That is something which I believe was a real challenge, as well as at the same time it was a real blessing in disguise as well. Because once you ride that steep path in a very short amount of time, you always run the risk of falling back faster. But if you can manage to stay on that path and manage to find the routes to hold on to kind of become an expert and ace climber. I'm far from being all of that, but I'm still on the path. But the initial surge on that path was pretty challenging. Now the challenges are on a daily basis. But as I said earlier, I know that I have the resilience to face them. Of course, learn from them. That's the biggest the key takeaway that I think is that helps me. That I always try and look to learn from challenges and opportunities. So the challenges that I talked of initially, they have helped me develop that mindset of learning, of being in a growth mindset and learning continuous. So these are pretty much the initial hurdles, which I hope I successfully have navigated in the initial days. So only for bigger hurdles to come, and also at the same time know that I have the resilience and the X factor probably, or the mojo that you might call in me to probably ace them, or just make sure that the path is not broken in any way.
So, what do you believe are the core responsibilities of a judge within the legal system?
It's a difficult question, but then I believe first and foremost to do the right thing, because as per law, to do the right thing, to ensure that your acts and to be aware that your acts have a huge repercussions and ramifications on the lives of the people who are coming to seek justice in your courtroom. And this awareness, I think, plays a massive role developing the jurisprudence of the legal righteousness, if I might say, or the science of doing the right things in the boundaries of law, and at the same time knowing the impact of the actions or one stroke of your pen that might have the lives of thousands of people. So I believe that is one of the really basic responsibilities that all judges, including me, should have. From that, there begins a never-ending list of responsibilities, because as a judge, you are always being judged, I might say, because you are always the eyes of the public with regard to be your decision, be your orders, or anything that you are doing in the courtroom. So I think you might not try to be a role model every time, but you always have to ensure that you are very, very well aware of what you are doing and how the things that you're doing, they are affecting or playing out in the larger sphere of things. That is one of the key responsibility which I find should be the starting point for any and every.
So, looking back, what lesson did you learn from overcoming challenges in your professional journey, and how have they shaped your approach to your work today?
With regard to the fact that how the challenges that I faced during my professional career to begin with, how they have shaped myself and developed a lot of resilience, as I have used that term, and it's become probably banal by now because I have used it often while answering your questions, that having the grit and having the resilience and knowing how to face adversity with not always a calm mind maybe, but at least knowing that what needs to be done after you have given some time to yourself to process it. I think that's the biggest learning that any and every challenge that I faced, that I absorbed from that, because you can always be having a setback in your life, both personal as well as professional, but the real learning is from getting up from that. As we know the proverb, like fall 7, get up 8. You can fall 7 times, but it matters whether you're getting up on the 8th time. So that is something I think is the biggest learning which I have, that meeting adversities with a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance, and at the same time being smart enough to know what calls for your attention and what does not. That is also very important, but that comes at a later level when you've managed to escape and navigate the initial struggles. But as a starting point, I think this is a very, very key learning for me, that how to face adversities and not be broken by them, but instead use them as stepping stones and ride higher, and just know that these are just your probably roadblocks, only for you to cross them and see the beautiful sunset at the end of the curve, maybe something like that, if I'm allowed to be too dreamy about it. But then this is what I think is the biggest learning from all the challenges that I've faced.
So, can you describe a typical day in the life of a judge?
I can't say a typical day in the life of a judge, but I can definitely say life of this judge. because I usually in the court in the courtroom by 10:30, and before that I am making notes of the daily cases that I have to go through. I have a pen and paper always, and on that I go through the daily cause list and look at each stage of each case proceeding that they might be in. Make a note of it on my rough sheet that I have, casual sheet that I keep every day, because that helps in keeping a track of the proceedings that are being called or my attention is being called to in each of them, and also gives me a lot of background to know where each stage of the civil suit or any other proceeding is, and therefore also to have this picture in my mind that probably on a microscopic level decision or an order that I passed today might be different than on a macroscopic level where I am looking at the ramification of that decision on the future course of this particular proceeding, as well as any connected proceeding that there might be. So this is why I make the note, and then I am on there in the courtroom by 10:30 listening to the matters, examining witnesses, recording depositions and passing orders if and when that requires to be passed out immediately, then on the same day as well, or rather at the same time when the hearing is being conducted. But if there's something which requires some more study to be done, then I usually reserve the order and I pass it at the second half, during the second half. That kind of gives me a lot of time to read as well as understand the matter at present that requires my attention, and before I pass the order. So the second half is usually for a few hearings and mostly for passing of orders which I reserve for during the day. And I try and make sure that I do not reserve orders more than a day. Although in the last 7 years that I've been working as a judge, I have tried to ensure that I do not reserve orders at all, unless and until the final judgments and final orders to dispose of a case. But the interlocutory orders that we have, the hearings that we have, I try and ensure to pass the order on the same day. That kind of helps in two things. Obviously, from the client perspective, litigant perspective, it kind of makes them aware as to what is the next step that they have to do, and they are just not waiting for another tariq, if I say, quote unquote, in the courtroom proceedings. And at the same time, it kind of gives me a lot of clarity that what I did was the right thing in this time that I had and studied the law and passed the right decision in the same day without making the client wait. Because as we know, justice delayed is again justice denied, and I try to do that and instill that in my daily working every day. So that is kind of an usual work day. And if I have judgments to write, then of course work comes home with me as well. I know some might say it's not a very healthy practice, but we have heard litany of judges saying that as a judge you can't help it, work will come home with you even if you want it or not. So it does come back from time to time over the weekends, as I am home presently, but I have a few orders and judgments to write. So it's part and parcel of being a judge, I think. It might sound very boring to many of the audience, I think, if especially, I don't know, someone who's looking at life from a very dreamy place. But then I think within this space, we have our opportunity to make them kind of understand that this also entails a lot of responsibilities, which would internally make you feel better once you do the job correctly. And that, I think, is a huge satisfaction for me at this point in time. That would be an overall day and the thoughts that I would usually have during a day as a judge.
So, can you discuss the importance of maintaining judicial independence and integrity in your role as a judge?
I don't have much to say here. I think this is something which is absolutely no-brainer if you ask me, because as a judge you're always expected to be independent and not have any pre-biased views while you're passing, because you must have seen that lady justice with the ribbon and blindfold that they have. So that means you just look at the things in both the hands, and it's a preponderance of probabilities that you have in the civil cases to really come to a decision. No bias, no particular prejudice work over there, because it is what it is. It is what you're supposed to do, and as I said, doing the right thing is always right. So it's kind of a no-brainer, honestly, because this is just absolutely essential, or as we say, a sine qua non for any judge to be partial and independent and only to look at things that you have in front of you in the courtroom, while at the same time being aware of larger interests that are playing. But partiality, independence, integrity, these are the principal qualities I think that all judges have. So that would be my thought.
So, how do you manage the emotional and mental toll that may come with preceding your difficult and sensitive cases?
Difficult, sensitive, I think, again, this is something where I might just differ slightly from the established point of view. I think from a litigant's point of view, his or her case is the most difficult case that he or she is facing. And as a judge, I try and look at each case like that. So that kind of helps me ensure a parity when I'm the amount of workload that I have, and two, that is again the sense of righteousness that kind of makes a litigant know or have the faith that his or her matter is the most important matter in the world. Because trust me, to a judge or to anyone for that matter, where there might be a lot of legal complex situations in play, might be difficult, but even the simplest of legally relevant matter might be the most difficult matter for for the litigant who's who has filed it. So that's why I kind of ensure that if I'm reading up for something, I try to read it up in bits and pieces. If I have a judgment to write and that requires reading up on a number of laws or a number of legal positions, I try to read up on them in pieces so that I can probably culminate all of them into one jigsaw puzzle to know the answer at the end of the reading. So the mental toll is something that comes with any person studying for his exams. I think it's the same. Just that I don't get questions asked in this exam, but I have to write the answer anyway because the question is in the form of the matter that is in front of me. So try and read fictions from time to time as well, and I try and go out, work out, take care of my legs as I was talking to Bill. Still undergoing recovery from an operation. So I try and go for runs in the morning or in the evening possible. This I think would be my way of dealing with the mental stress of things. Emotionally, as I said, I keep reading a lot of Stoic principles and values, which I believe they have their own role to play. Probably one person is able to absorb them, and that's why I think resilience and emotional stability, these things are something which I try to read a lot about them and try and probably learn and absorb from them so that those things can be reflected in the way how I behave. So I think that would be pretty much the two ways that I use to keep myself in a stable situation while at the same time passing judgments and all this.
So can you explain the difference between civil and criminal law and provide example for each?
And taken back to my law school days, civil side is mostly what I deal with is to do with landlord tenant properties, real estate, injunctions, contracts, a lot of it. And there might be a lot of criminal matters connected to it. So there might be a dispute with regard to one landlord and a tenant, or there might be a dispute with regard to a contract which two persons have signed. And there might be extra legal ways that they might look to enforce all those contracts or settle all those disputes, which might lead to a lot of criminal disputes. Someone is getting hurt by the act of someone is getting tempted to be ordered or threatened or intimidated. So they are very much, I think, related as being the two sides of a coin. So as a difference, I think civil disputes, there can be instances in criminal disputes where life and liberty of a person is at stake. Like we have bail matters where if you are jailed or if you are arrested, you will have to be produced before the nearest magistrate in 24 hours because their decision is with regard to life and liberty. In civil, those aspects are a bit far and few, if I might say, although there are a few aspects of civil prison. But then this is one of the basic differences, I think, in civil and criminal laws. Otherwise, I believe from point of view of a jurist or a point of view of a law student, they're both very interesting and they're both calls for a lot of aspects of understanding which you might not counter daily, your regular dealings.
So have there any instance where you had to make difficult ethical decisions and how did you approach them?
Not really, not in my professional career yet. I'm lucky that I've not had to such crossroads of ethical and moral conundrums because I always try to ensure that whatever I do is ethically correct because as I said, I was helping a few minutes back. Work ethic is something which is very dear to me and it kind of underscores a lot of my ability to work. So my first and foremost attempt is always to ensure that ethically what I'm doing is correct. And from the legal point of view, fortunately I have not had to face a situation where they have been at loggerheads. But if I have to face, then probably we'll have to see what the situation calls for. But otherwise, I think there cannot be a situation where legally something is right as well as that is ethically not right because law and ethics I believe they are on the same sides. There might be exceptions which I presently cannot think of, but then I think when you are doing something which is ethically correct, then you are doing it with on the side of which is law support as well because there might be a situation where your one of your judgment kind of evicts a well-settled family from the residence. You might think that is ethically incorrect. But at the same time, if you look back, probably that family had encroached upon the area and by now they had settled themselves unlawfully and for the last 5-6 years because again there is an aspect of law. If you have unlawfully encroached with the notice for the 20 years, then there is a different side of law to it, as we call adverse possession and prescription. These things are there. But then anyway, not going to the legal details of it. So there's always a background to any dispute that you have. I believe ethically all of those disputes can be supported with the legally right decision as well. So that's my take on law and ethics and the crossroads, if any, there are.
So till date, what has been the most difficult case that you have handled?
That's a difficult question because, as I said, I kind of look at every case full volume of importance. But I'm not supposed to also discuss much with regard to matters which have been discussed in the courtrooms. But I can say there have been instances livelihoods of people were at stake and the rights of property rights of someone they were also at stake. So at that point of time, it kind of took up a lot of time for me to study and understand the situation. At the same time, examine the positions of the witnesses, because law entails all of this as well. What is written in the books and what the witnesses come and say, and that is also something which is critically important, I think. So difficult cases often have some answers in between the pages and the lines of evidences and in between the witnesses' testimonies. So I think that's my way of dealing with difficulties and trying to find the solutions from within the case record itself, I would say.
So, what advice would you give to young lawyers just starting their career in terms of building a solid foundation for success in legal profession?
Phrase that immediately was about to slip my mouth or my tongue, I thought that would be very often used. That is perseverance and hard work. I know I might be drawing a lot of wrath and ire of all the young lawyers and young law students out there that we are already working so hard. How hard does this person expect us not to work? Well, I'm being honest, law is a profession, and so as any other profession, I believe, because the better you work, the harder you work, and the smarter you work at the same time, you are rewarded. But the problem lies in how to do all of that, how to work hard and how to work smart, and to know whether you're doing enough at the end of the day. Well, therefore, my advice would be for the students, law students exploring their careers, I would say do everything and anything that is possible in a legal career. Like take up, you don't have to work only in law firms or intern only at law firms or particular lawyers or anything, but do a varied amount of internships, varied case studies and subject matters, because that I think would expand your area of interest and you would figure out what you want. Because if you think you have already found it, then all the best, great for you, but there might be something which you would have liked much more than what you are presently dealing with. So the world is out there for you to explore. Just go out there and do as much work as you can, as much field as you can, but at the same time take care of the fact that you have retained the sanity and the ability to understand what you're doing and why you're doing, because the extrinsic reward or motivation, that's a different thing. Because in the end of the day, I think the intrinsic motivation factors for me a lot, because if you don't think that what you're doing is the best thing, or if you don't know why you're doing one particular thing, if that why, the reason or the answer of that why cannot be aligned with your own belief and principle, then I think it becomes a struggle. Every day is a struggle then. But then if you ask me, I would say do anything and everything that you want to. Do a lot of things, lot of activities, but always know why you're doing whatever you're doing. And always have this open mind to take feedback from your seniors or your co-workers or even anyone in the industry that you're working. Because I believe a 360-degree feedback is always helpful than take feedback from superiors. So that kind of helps in being a well-rounded individual as you enter the workforce. So be open to all of that and be open to all the kind of work that you're getting. That helps you develop your interest and helps you understand and relate the areas of law. Because trust me, when you are 2 years senior, you would find that you might be relating one particular field of law to another. And to draw those lines, I think it's very important that you have an expansive study in probably all the possible fields and see what you like. I'm not saying you have to go in every day all in, but then just know that what you're doing is the best that you are doing presently, and that this would help you in future to develop an understanding as to what you like and why you like.
So, what are some common pitfalls or mistakes that young lawyers should be aware of and how they can avoid them?
I think this is something which I see quite often. I see fresh graduates, I would say, who are moving in a matter and they're not really aware of what the matter contains. When you are dealing with anything, be it in a courtroom, be it otherwise, be it just your studies, I think what is very important is to have a basic understanding. I'm not saying you have to be thorough with everything and everything, but then at least have the basic understanding to know that what this subject matter is, turn a few pages to see what has happened before this present stage, or at least to see how you are doing things and what effect your things that you are doing, your actions or inactions, how that is going to affect the matter at hand. So that might be your law school project, that might be a moot court, that might be even a game of football or basketball if you're having a good time with your friends. Just know what you are supposed to do in a particular situation. And I think that is going to help a lot, and the preparation that I'm talking of is something which I believe is really key, so that whenever you enter a room, be it with lawyers or be it with the clients, you should know what that room consists of, and what you're supposed to do in that room, and how or in what way whatever you're doing is going to affect that room and the participants. I think these are a few basic understandings and learnings which all of us, not just members, but all of us should try and do. Because if we know how things are going to be affected by our thoughts and processes, then probably we'll do a much better job than what we currently do. So yeah, that might be a few of the learnings that I think lawyers or anyone for that matter would have.
So for individuals aspiring to become judge, what steps should you recommend they take to prepare themselves for such a career path?
See, if you want to be a judge, you have to have your LLB degree as well as your enrollment with the Bar Council, and that these are the first few basic, like I might say, requirements which you have to follow, like having a law degree and having enrollment, and then you are eligible to study and sit for the exams of the district judiciary, which I believe for the general is from age 21 to age 35. Right? Not really sure of all the states, but presently I think it's from in West Bengal is age 21 to age 35 for the general category. And so your LLB degree and enrollment, and then from the preparatory point of view, if Gaurav you ask me, I would say make sure you read all the text very thoroughly, because that is something which I, of course, during my college days did not have the time to probably do with all the projects and everything. But then with a few months that I had to prepare, I would say make sure you read all the texts and all the textbooks that you have for each of the subjects in the syllabus, and make an understanding of that and make a note with regard to which you can refer, because you can't always refer to the textbook when you're faced with a question. So in the process of making that note and reading the book, you learn a lot. So even if you're not actually looking to learn and mug up a lot of it, those things while you're reading as well as making the notes, those things they kind of stay. You retain them even if you want to or you do not want to. I think these practices, when I was asked by many aspiring judges, like how do you prepare and how do you go about it, how do you do it in such a short time, I would only say like read as much as possible and make notes. That's the first step, which I believe is going to be really, really helpful in your learning progress. And then I would say reflect and revise from time to time. These are the two things which I believe, they might sound very easy, but then trust me, it's easier said than done. But having done that, I would say you're not going to regret it, irrespective of the results, because the understanding that you're going to get from each of these subjects after you have read them through and made those notes and revised them thoroughly, it's massive. That is going to give you a huge leeway, if you ask me, when you have set out your practice, or even if you have started your career as a judge or otherwise, because the understanding of the subjects is very basic, which I believe is required for someone to know what he or she is getting into.
So now we'll start a rapid round.
Okay.
Most influential legal figure in your life?
My seniors, I think, and the lawyers that I face in my courtroom, because I learn a lot from them.
Best way to handle a difficult client?
That I will not be able to say, because I do not do client-facing work presently. So I think probably I'm not the right person to answer that.
Biggest lesson you have learned from a legal setback?
Well, from any setback, I think the only lesson that I've learned is facing the next one in a better manner, as I've kept repeating. So from legal setback as well, I think that would be the first and foremost the most important thing that I learned. Face it better when you're challenged the next step.
Favorite legal term or phrase?
Consensus ad idem, because that's the rarest thing in the courtroom, because it means meeting of minds. In contract law we learned it, because in the courtroom rarely anyone has that, especially the two sides of the case. So that's very lacking in my daily activity, because I very rarely see any consensus ad idem. But then I guess that's why it's my favorite, if you ask me at this point.
One thing you wish you knew before starting your legal career?
Well, that you have to work really hard. That happened once I figured that there's no other way to do things, that you just have to work really hard.
The most important quality of a successful lawyer or judge?
Hard work, perseverance, and being resilient to adversity and setbacks. These are the very two important qualities, I think, for anyone, I think, for that matter.
Preferred travel destination?
I don't know, travel in India, I've traveled. The international world, I've not traveled that much. But then there are a lot of places in India as well which I haven't seen that well. Probably the southern side of the southwestern side, that is the part where Bangalore, and the coastal sides from Goa downwards. I've been to Goa, but I've not been to the coastal sides downwards, Goa downwards. And internationally, I have been to London for work as well as pleasure. So maybe that is there on my list in the top. London would be the name. Also, it has a club that it consists of the team that I support in the Premier League. So, of course, I think London would be the person.
proudest moment in your career?
The fact that I could achieve the clearing of the judiciary with the rank second in that limited time, and also the fact that I could qualify as a solicitor in England and Wales while at the same time having a full-time job as a judge. So these two achievements, they kind of stand out because, again, as I said, I always knew of myself as a person who likes to have a lot of fun in life and not very hardworking, I guess. But then with these two achievements, my belief about myself has changed, and that it's a great achievement, I think, because the freedom to know that you can achieve things when you work hard is a great freedom. It's a great thing to know about it.
Best piece of advice received?
I think I haven't received it from any live person who I'm talking to, but then I've read all these books, and there's this particular concept. I'm sure you must have heard of it. It's in the book called Atomic Habits. Like your microscopic actions, when done over a huge long period of time, whether it be good or bad, they have a massive and profound impact on where you end up. So in that book, there was this example of a flight, not really remembering the destination. So they said that every 1 degree deviation that you make in the flight path would lead to you, if you're traveling from west to the east, it would lead to you completely down to the south, the United States. So it's like you can end up in a completely different place if you do certain minor small things over a period of time. So even a 1 degree deviation over a period of time could lead to such massive results. So minor good thing or a bad thing, when done repeatedly over a long period of time, might have certain profound impact. And now it's up to you how you choose to look at it. You might do the good thing, however small it might be, or you might do the bad thing, or rather the right thing or the wrong thing. The impact that it would have on your life is massive, I believe.
So at last, one line that defines you.
I'm a person who loves to have a lot of fun, but at the same time who loves to work hard and be rewarded for all the fun and all the hard work that he or she has done.
Great. So as we drew the curtains on today's episode, I am profoundly grateful to our esteemed guest, Mr. Banerjee, for gracing us with his presence and sharing his wealth of knowledge and experience. His journey, marked by resilience, passion, and unwavering commitment to excellence, serve a testament to the profound impact that mentorship can have on shaping the trajectories of our life. I hope that you, dear listeners, have found Mr. Banerjee's insight and enlightening and inspiring as I have. As we continue our respective paths, may we carry with us the lessons learned from his journey and remain steadfast in our belief in the power of mentorship to guide us towards the future filled with endless possibilities. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, remember to keep believing in your future and incredible mentors who light us. Thank you very much for sharing your journey and advices on our show. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you so much, Gaurav.
My pleasure.